The imperial nursery was silent, except for the faint hum of the palace lights. Outside, the hallways were empty, filled only with echoes of footsteps that once belonged to the bravest caretakers in the galaxy. Inside, however, chaos waited. 3 tiny dragon hatchlings twisted and cried in their crystalline cribs. Fire danced across the walls without burning, and frost spread across the floor without cold. The palace alarms had long stopped meaning anything to the court. They were useless against the strange power of the Emperor's children. The last babysitter had fled just hours ago. Her hair was singed, her uniform frozen in patches, and her mind shaken. She refused to speak of what happened, only muttering that the hatchlings were monsters that no human could survive. The other caretakers, hearing the tale, had quit before even stepping near the nursery doors. The Emperor watched from his private chambers, his face hard but his eyes tired. He had built an empire that spanned galaxies, but these children, his children, terrified him. Even he did not understand what they were capable of. Desperation had pushed him to a solution that the court found laughable. A human nurse had been summoned from a distant world. She was ordinary, fragile, and entirely untrained in dealing with dragons. Her name was Myra Vance. She had no psychic shields, no experience with energy manipulation, and no knowledge of the strange ways of the Empire's creatures. The court mocked the Emperor, saying she would not last an hour. But the Emperor was silent. There were no other options. Myra arrived at the palace under strict orders. She was not to leave until the hatchlings bonded or died. She had heard whispers about the nursery on the transport ship. She had heard tales of other caretakers fleeing in terror. She had even been warned that some of the hatchlings' cries could break a person's mind. Yet, she stepped into the palace courtyard calmly, her uniform simple and her hands clean. She had no fear of dragons, only a quiet confidence in her ability to care. The doors to the nursery opened before her. They were carved from black crystal, etched with protective runes that had failed countless times before. Myra stepped inside. The air hit her like a wall, warm, cold, and electric all at once. The hatchling's eyes glowed, and the room shook as if it were alive. Myra took a deep breath, letting her calm fill her body. She knelt beside the nearest crib, not with fear, but with quiet observation. The hatchling stared at her. Orlith, a tiny dragon with scales that shimmered like liquid gold, tilted her head curiously. Nyxera, dark as a moonless night, opened her wings slightly, but made no sound. Veshan, the smallest, trembled with unspent energy, eyes glowing bright red. All 3 had twisted energy inside them, energy that could destroy the nursery and everyone nearby. Myra did not flinch. She simply hummed a soft, old human lullaby. It was the first sound in weeks the hatchlings did not attack or bend reality with. The fire dimmed. The frost receded. The room felt calmer. Myra's voice was small, but steady. She extended her hand slowly, letting the hatchlings sniff her warmth. Orlith inched forward, curling a tiny claw around Myra's finger. Nyxera tilted her head, and Veshan blinked, mesmerized by the sound. For the first time, the hatchlings did not see a threat. They saw a presence that made the chaos fade. Myra examined them quietly. She noted that their scales were still too soft, their claws too sharp, and their psychic senses far too open. She whispered to them, "I am here. I will not hurt you. You are safe." She moved from crib to crib, speaking softly, touching lightly, letting her calm flow into the room like water into a dry bowl. The palace sensors recorded something unexpected. Energy readings in the nursery dropped steadily. The fire and ice that had danced violently were now gentle glows, harmless and soft. The alarms stopped ringing on their own. For the first time, in weeks, the nursery had peace. Outside the nursery, the court waited, uneasy. Some had hoped the human nurse would fail quickly. Instead, reports came in, the nursery stabilized. The Emperor, still watching, leaned forward. He had seen countless alien species. He had commanded fleets. He had tamed planets. Yet nothing prepared him for this quiet human who did what no soldier, no mage, and no robot could do: calm dragons. Myra spent hours that first day simply observing. She fed the hatchlings small amounts of nutrient paste, humming softly between bites. She cleaned the nursery carefully, moving slowly to avoid sudden motions that could trigger the dragon's energy. Whenever a hatchling cried, she held it gently, rocking it in her arms. She did not yell, she did not panic, she did not run. The nursery responded in kind. As night fell, Myra lay on a soft mat beside the cribs. The hatchlings curled close, their tiny bodies warm and oddly comforting. She realized something profound: the hatchlings were not monsters. They were terrified. They had never known safety. Every previous caretaker had come with fear, and the hatchlings had mirrored it. Myra's human calm was something they could trust, something they could bond with. The Emperor's eyes softened slightly as he watched from his chamber. For the first time, he considered that perhaps humanity had a gift he had not understood. Not strength, not psychic power, not aggression, but patience. The quiet patience of a human nurse could tame creatures that had terrified empires. And as Myra drifted into a light sleep, the nursery remained calm. No fire danced, no frost spread. The hatchlings slept beside her, tiny bodies glowing faintly. She had survived the nursery no one survived. And perhaps, just perhaps, she would teach them how to survive too. The palace would never be the same again. Myra woke to the soft glow of the nursery lights. The hatchling stirred beside her, tiny wings twitching and claws scraping softly against the crystal floor. The room was quiet, calmer than the stories had described. She rose carefully, making no sudden movements, and checked each dragon. Orlith, the golden one, blinked at her with curious eyes. Nyxera, the dark one, curled her small body into a perfect circle, her wings folding neatly over her back. Veshan, the smallest, hissed softly, but did not lash out. Myra smiled and whispered, "Good morning. You're safe. I'm here." She had learned quickly that fear made the hatchlings dangerous. Every prior caretaker had entered trembling, shouting, or hiding behind protective spells. The dragons had reflected that fear tenfold. Myra had none of that. She did not carry weapons, shields, or threats. She only carried calm. Her presence alone seemed to make the nursery less hostile. Feeding them was tricky. They demanded attention in bursts, sometimes thrashing violently, other times curling as if afraid of being touched. Myra moved slowly, her hands gentle, placing the nutrient paste into small dishes. She sang softly as she worked, a human tune she had learned from her childhood. Orlith leaned forward, tasting carefully. Nyxera watched with wide eyes, her tail twitching. Veshan sniffed at the air, then edged closer. The dragons began to eat without fear, their energy still wild but controlled. Myra noticed something unusual. The hatchlings seemed to respond to more than her words. They mirrored her emotions. When she felt calm, the room remained steady. When she felt a flicker of worry, the air trembled. She realized that no other caretaker had understood this. They had come with fear or excitement, anger or judgment. The hatchlings had sensed it and amplified it. Myra's calm was the first thing they had ever experienced that they could trust. The days passed slowly. Myra spent hours beside them, observing, talking, and holding them when they whimpered. Orlith often pressed against her shoulder, letting her cradle the tiny body. Nyxera stayed close to her knees, watching and listening. Veshan was still cautious, but he had begun to respond to her humming. She discovered that a gentle touch and a soft voice could settle their wild energy. The nursery no longer trembled violently. The fire and frost no longer reacted to their moods uncontrollably. The Emperor visited quietly one afternoon. He had watched the human for several days, curious and wary. "Why does she succeed where my finest caretakers failed?" he asked one of his advisors. The advisor shrugged, unsure. "She is human," he said. "Perhaps they are stronger than we know." Myra had not seen him. She continued to sit on the soft mat, rocking Veshan gently. The hatchlings were calm around her. Their eyes glowed softly, not with wild energy, but with curiosity. Myra hummed a lullaby, noticing that their breathing synchronized with hers. She realized then that the bond was simple. They needed someone who did not fear them, someone who could remain steady while the world around them fell apart. One night, a warning arrived. Imperial scientists had discovered that the hatchling's energy could become unstable without constant emotional support. Any disturbance, fear, anger, or even excitement from the palace staff, could trigger a dangerous surge. Myra understood what this meant. If she left, even briefly, the nursery could become a disaster. She stayed close, moving carefully, letting her presence guide the dragons. She began small experiments, speaking softly while touching the hatchlings' tiny wings and tails. She observed how they responded to gentle motions, to soft light, and to calm breathing. They learned quickly, responding to her hands, her voice, and even her emotions. Orlith curled around her arm as she held him. Nyxera rested her head on her lap. Veshan hesitated, then inched closer, trusting her despite his fear. The nursery became a place of quiet learning. The other court members were amazed. What they had assumed was impossible, a human controlling or calming 3 emperors' hatchlings, was happening daily. Myra did not fight them. She did not dominate or command. She simply provided safety. The dragons mirrored her calm and learned to channel their energy without destroying the nursery. The emperor finally entered the nursery himself, moving carefully so as not to startle the hatchlings. Myra stood and bowed slightly, keeping her tone steady. The dragons watched him but made no sudden movements. Olith sniffed the emperor's sleeve and then returned to Myra. Nyxra's eyes followed the human, but she stayed curled in place. Veshin remained close, peeking from Myra's arms. The emperor realized that the hatchlings trusted her completely. Myra spent weeks observing and learning their moods. Each hatchling had its own personality. Olith was curious and bold, testing limits gently. Nyxra was cautious, sensitive to every sound or movement. Veshin was shy but clever, learning quickly from the others and from Myra. They responded not to commands, but to care, patience, and consistency. Myra became their anchor, and slowly, they began to respond to her rather than their wild instincts. One evening, Myra whispered to them, "You do not need to be afraid. You do not need to fight. You are safe." The hatchlings settled beside her, their bodies glowing faintly with energy. The room was calm. No fire danced uncontrollably, no frost spread across the floors. Myra smiled, realizing that the nursery, once impossible to survive, was now peaceful because of one human who did not run. For the first time, the hatchlings knew trust. For the first time, the emperor knew that his children could be more than chaos. And for the first time, Myra understood the secret. Humans were fragile, but their calm was stronger than fear, stronger than power, and stronger than any force in the galaxy. The nursery remained quiet that night. The hatchlings slept close to her, their tiny bodies radiating gentle warmth. Myra lay down beside them, keeping watch. She did not need to control them with fear or force. She only needed to be present. And that was enough. The palace outside whispered rumors, but Myra did not care. The nursery, once a place of terror, had become a place of hope. And the human who did not run had changed everything. Myra had been in the nursery for weeks now. The hatchlings, Olith, Nyxra, and Veshin, had grown slightly, their tiny wings stronger, their claws sharper, but their energy no longer uncontrolled. She had learned to read their moods, noticing small shifts in their glowing eyes or the way their tails twitched. She understood them better than anyone in the palace, and she was beginning to see the reason why she was different from the other caretakers. The scientists had arrived one morning, carrying their instruments and sensors. They were curious, skeptical, and nervous. The emperor had insisted they study the human who could calm his hatchlings. Myra watched as they carefully measured heart rates, energy spikes, and psychic feedback. The readings fascinated them, but what they could not explain made them uneasy. "Look at this," said one of the scientists, pointing to a display of energy flows. "The hatchling surges are linked to the human's emotional state. When she is calm, the spikes drop dramatically. When she moves or speaks nervously, there is a slight rise, but far lower than expected." Myra listened quietly. She understood in her own way what the scientists could not. Humans, she thought, were strange creatures. Their emotions could shape the world without them even trying. Fear and anger could cause destruction, but calm and patience could bring control to chaos. The hatchlings did not need a shield, a spell, or a weapon. They needed someone steady, someone real, someone unafraid. The hatchlings reacted immediately to her presence. Olith leaned against her shoulder while she held a small tray of food. Nyxra's wings folded neatly around her body as she watched Myra's hands move slowly. Veshin, usually the most jittery, stayed close to her side. They had learned to trust her instincts. Her calm was stronger than any barrier or spell. The scientists began asking questions, trying to understand how one fragile human could control three dangerous creatures. "Perhaps her mind has a natural resonance with their psychic energy," one said. "Something about her biology is compatible." Myra did not know what resonance meant, but she understood the feeling. She had grown up on a harsh, violent world. Humans had evolved to survive not by strength or magic, but by patience, empathy, and emotional control. She had learned to keep calm when everything fell apart. The hatchlings responded to that. They could sense the calm in her, and they mirrored it. It was as if her heart had a rhythm that told them it was safe to exist without hurting anything. One evening, Myra noticed that the hatchlings were restless. She placed her hands gently on Olith's head, murmuring soft words. "You are safe. You do not need to fight. You can breathe." The golden hatchling leaned against her, wings folding slowly. Nyxra crawled to Myra's lap, pressing her small head against her legs. Veshin still hesitated, but Myra held her hand near him. Slowly, he inched closer, letting his warmth meet hers. The scientists watched in amazement. "We have never seen anything like this," one whispered. "She does not command them. She does not threaten them. And yet, they obey her instinctively." Myra smiled faintly. She had learned another secret: the hatchlings were not just reacting to her presence. They were learning from it. They were beginning to understand boundaries, limits, and control. They were absorbing calm as if it were nourishment. They were learning that their power did not have to be chaos. The Emperor visited again, quietly observing from a distance. He had seen his children grow stronger, yet gentler. The human's biology was teaching what no teacher, spell, or warrior could. Myra had not changed the hatchlings through force or training. She had changed them by being herself, calm, steady, patient, and unafraid. Myra began to experiment carefully. She moved her hands slowly across the nursery, tracing patterns in the air. She spoke softly to the hatchlings, noting the responses. When she hummed, their energy flowed in gentle waves. When she breathed slowly, their glowing eyes dimmed to soft lights. It was not magic, she realized, and it was not a spell. It was a human gift, the ability to survive and soothe, even in a world filled with chaos. Olaf tilted his head and blinked at her. Myra reached out, letting her hand rest on his tiny forehead. "You are learning," she said softly. Nyxra curled closer, wings brushing Myra's arm. Veshin finally stepped forward, letting her touch him lightly. All three hatchlings were beginning to mirror her movements, her breathing, her calm. The palace staff whispered in hallways. Rumors spread that humans were not as weak as they seemed. They did not dominate with weapons or psychic power. They dominated with something quieter, harder to measure, but stronger than anything else: stability. Myra was teaching the hatchlings that power could exist without fear, that chaos could be tamed without force. Night fell over the nursery. Myra lay on the soft mat beside the cribs. The hatchlings curled around her like small, warm shadows. Their energy flowed gently, synchronized with her calm breathing. Olitha's golden scales shimmered softly. Nyxra's black wings gleamed under the lights. Veshin blinked slowly, finally trusting the rhythm of Myra's presence. Myra whispered into the quiet room, "You are safe. You are learning. You do not need to be afraid." The hatchlings closed their eyes, small breaths rising and falling with hers. She realized that they were no longer dangerous, at least not to the palace. They had learned something far more important: they could control themselves because someone believed they could. The Emperor observed silently from the balcony above. He had commanded armies, conquered worlds, and studied creatures beyond imagination. Yet Myra's human calm had done what none of those could: she had taught his children peace. He understood then that humanity had a gift no empire could measure. Not strength, not magic, not power, but the quiet ability to stabilize even the most dangerous forces in the galaxy. And as Myra drifted to sleep that night, the hatchlings nestled beside her, small bodies glowing gently. The nursery, once a place of chaos and terror, had become a place of learning and calm. The human nurse had uncovered the secret written not in magic or science, but in biology: humans could survive by being calm, and they could teach others to do the same. For the first time, the Emperor's hatchlings could live without fear. And for the first time, Myra understood the true reason she had been chosen: she was the one who could turn monsters into children. The palace would never look at humans, or dragons, the same way again. Weeks passed in the nursery, and Myra had settled into a quiet rhythm with the hatchlings. Olith, Nyxra, and Veshin had grown stronger and calmer, responding to her voice, touch, and presence. The palace no longer trembled with their energy, and the alarms that once screamed at every cry had fallen silent. Myra had become more than a nurse: she had become the anchor of the Emperor's brood. Word spread beyond the palace walls. Other empires, distant worlds, and alien scientists heard of the human who could calm the Emperor's dangerous hatchlings. Some were curious. Some were envious. Some were fearful. Soon, emissaries arrived, sending official requests to study Myra and her methods. They offered technology, wealth, and alliances in exchange for a chance to understand the secret of human calm. The Emperor read their messages silently, his expression unreadable. His advisors whispered warnings. They want her to come to their worlds. They want her to teach their people. Some may try to take her by force. The Emperor leaned back in his chair. She belongs here. She keeps my children safe. Without her, the nursery would be lost. Anyone who threatens her threatens them. Myra noticed the tension in the palace. Even the hatchlings seemed uneasy at times, their glowing eyes flickering when strangers arrived. She understood immediately: the hatchlings could sense danger, even from far away. They were protective, but they could only be steady when she was near. One morning, a representative from a neighboring star system entered the nursery with a formal request. "We wish to study the human nurse," he said, bowing. "Her skills could benefit our research and defense programs. We offer valuable compensation." Myra shook her head gently. "I cannot leave the nursery. The hatchlings need me here." The representative's eyes narrowed. "You do not understand. Our scientists can control them, teach them, and even enhance their powers. You are human. You are fragile. It is dangerous for you to remain here." Myra's voice was calm. "I understand the risks. But I am needed here more than anywhere else. The hatchlings respond to calm, not force. Without me, no one can protect them." The representative left, anger simmering beneath his polite smile. The palace staff whispered in hallways. "No human can hold the power of dragons," some said. Yet here she remains, controlling 3 of the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. Myra ignored them. Her focus was the hatchlings. A sudden alarm one evening confirmed her fears. Sensors had detected energy fluctuations from the nursery. Myra ran inside, finding the hatchlings agitated. Olith's scales glimmered with bursts of golden energy. Nixra's wings stretched wide, frost creeping across the floor. Veshin hissed nervously, sparks of fire flickering around him. Myra knelt quickly, holding her hands out calmly. "It is all right. Stay with me. You are safe," she whispered. The hatchlings hesitated. The energy rose and fell like a storm, but Myra's calm remained. Slowly, Olith pressed against her shoulder, Nixra folded her wings, and Veshin inched closer. The storm subsided, leaving only gentle warmth. Myra breathed deeply, letting her calm flow into the room. She realized the truth: if she left the nursery, even briefly, chaos would return. Her presence was the only thing keeping the hatchlings controlled. The Emperor arrived shortly after, silent and observing. Myra explained what had happened, her voice steady. "They react to my absence. They sense fear and instability. I cannot leave them. They need me here." The Emperor's eyes softened. He had tried everything: the best caretakers, the most advanced technologies, even psychic regulators. Nothing had worked. Only Myra's calm, human presence kept his children safe. Later, the Emperor made a decision that shocked the galaxy. He summoned the Council of Empires and announced that Myra Vance was to remain in the Imperial Nursery indefinitely. She would be honored as the guardian of the Emperor's brood, protected by law and defended by all who served the Empire. Any harm that came to her would be considered a direct threat to the dynasty itself. The news spread quickly. Some alien governments were outraged, claiming the human was being given too much power. Others were amazed. A human, fragile and ordinary, had become the protector of creatures that could destroy empires. Myra did not seek recognition. She only wanted to keep the hatchlings safe. In the nursery, the hatchlings seemed to understand. They had learned to trust her completely, following her movements, adjusting their energy to match her calm, and responding to her voice as if it were the only law they needed. Olith perched on her shoulder, Nixra curled at her feet, and Veshin lay close to her side. The nursery glowed softly with their harmonized energy. Myra continued her work, teaching the hatchlings small lessons in control. She showed them that power could be gentle, that fire could warm without burning, and frost could shield without freezing. Each day, their growth was steady, guided not by force, but by patience. The palace outside whispered rumors about the human nurse. They said she had done what no alien, no soldier, and no mage could do. She had tamed dragons with something that could not be measured by senses or spells: calm, care, and trust. One night, Myra sat in the center of the nursery, the hatchlings gathered around her. The palace was quiet, but beyond the walls, the galaxy watched and waited. Foreign powers had demanded access to her. Some might try to take her by force, and others by deception. But inside the nursery, nothing could touch her or the hatchlings. Myra's calm was stronger than any threat. She whispered to the hatchlings, "You are safe. You do not need to fight. The galaxy may demand many things, but here, we are in control. You are learning. You are safe with me." Olith purred softly, Nixra blinked calmly, and Veshin nuzzled her hand. Myra smiled, knowing that no army, no weapon, and no threat could unseat the bond she had formed. The Emperor watched from the balcony, silent and thoughtful. He had never seen a human capable of such influence. The galaxy could demand, threaten, and challenge, but Myra's quiet presence had done something no force could undo. She had made the hatchlings calm, safe, and loyal. Her patience, her steadiness, and her humanity had become the law of the nursery. And as the palace lights dimmed that night, the nursery remained peaceful. The hatchlings slept close to Myra, their energy steady and gentle. Outside, the galaxy might be scheming, but inside, the human who did not run had proven her power. The galaxy demanded, but she had already answered in the only way that mattered, by keeping the Emperor's children safe. The nursery would never be the same, and neither would the galaxy's view of humans. Years had passed since Myra first stepped into the Imperial nursery. The hatchlings, Orlith, Nyxera, and Veshin, had grown into young dragons, their scales brighter, wings stronger, and energy more controlled than anyone had ever thought possible. The nursery, once a place of fear and chaos, had become a quiet haven, a testament to a single human's patience and care. Myra moved among them with ease, her calm guiding their every motion, her presence shaping the creatures' minds in ways no power or weapon could. The Emperor watched from his balcony as Myra walked through the nursery, the dragons following her like shadows. Their energy was steady, gentle, and measured, no longer wild or destructive. For the first time, the Emperor felt a deep pride, not in the Empire, not in its armies, but in the quiet strength of humanity. Myra had done what no warrior or scientist could. She had transformed his children from terrifying forces into beings of balance and control. Outside the nursery, word of the human's success spread across the galaxy. Scientists, diplomats, and rulers came from distant worlds to observe. They had heard tales of the human nurse who could calm dragons, and they wanted to understand her secret. Myra did not show off, nor did she explain in great detail. She only demonstrated her care and patience, letting the dragon's controlled energy speak for itself. Orlith, now fully grown for his age, perched on Myra's shoulder as she walked. Nyxera followed, wings folded neatly, her dark eyes calm and observant. Veshin, the smallest yet cleverest, padded beside her feet. The dragon's loyalty and trust were absolute. They mirrored Myra's emotions, her calm, and her steadiness, proving that humanity's strength was not in force, but in care. The Emperor called a meeting of his council. "These dragons are my children," he said, his voice steady. "They have power that could destroy worlds. Yet, they are safe because of one human. Let all the galaxy see that strength is not only in weapons, but in the calm hands that guide power." The council murmured in agreement, realizing that humanity had gifted something far rarer than energy or technology, the ability to stabilize what was too wild to control. Myra continued her work quietly, tending to the dragon's needs, teaching them to harness their energy, and helping them understand restraint. She showed them that fire could warm without burning, that frost could shield without freezing, and that their thoughts could shape the world without harm. Slowly, the hatchlings, once feared, became symbols of controlled power. One day, Myra observed a group of young humans visiting the palace. They had been sent from frontier worlds, ordinary humans with no special training. Myra allowed them to interact with the dragons under careful supervision. The dragons were calm, responding to the humans' emotions as they had to Myra's. The visitors were awed, realizing that the secret was not the dragon's power, but the human's calm presence. The Emperor observed silently. He understood now that humanity's gift was quiet, almost invisible, yet stronger than fleets, armies, or energy weapons. Humans survived where others could not because they could remain steady in chaos. They could influence the wildest forces without raising a hand in anger or command. Myra had proven this truth in the most extraordinary way. The hatchlings had grown into young dragon lords, capable of incredible power, yet controlled and disciplined. They no longer terrified the palace staff or the court. They followed Myra's guidance, learning patience, trust, and balance. Even in the face of danger, they responded calmly, relying on her presence rather than instinctive destruction. Rumors of Myra's work spread beyond the empire. Alien worlds began to seek human guides for their own wild creatures and unstable systems. Humans were no longer considered weak or fragile. They were seen as anchors, stabilizers, and guardians, able to calm forces that no machine or spell could tame. The galaxy began to recognize the quiet legacy of humanity, survival not through aggression, but through care, patience, and emotional strength. One evening, Myra walked through the nursery garden, the dragons following. Orlith perched on her shoulder, Nyxera brushed against her legs, and Veshin trailed behind. The sun cast soft light over their scales, making them shimmer like living jewels. Myra smiled faintly, realizing the truth. The dragons had not only survived, but thrived. They had learned restraint, compassion, and trust, lessons no empire could teach, but a human could. The Emperor joined her quietly. "They are extraordinary," he said, watching the dragons. "And yet, They owe their calm to you. Humanity has given them something no empire could, balance. Myra nodded, understanding the depth of his words. Her work had changed not only the hatchlings, but the palace, the empire, and perhaps even the galaxy's perception of humans. As night fell, the dragons curled around Myra, their bodies glowing softly. The nursery was calm, peaceful, and safe. Myra whispered, "You are strong, but you are gentle. You are powerful, but you are kind. This is what matters." The dragons responded with soft movements, nuzzling her, breathing calmly, and trusting completely. Beyond the palace walls, the galaxy continued its wars and politics, its threats and ambitions. But inside the nursery, Myra had shown that the quiet power of a single human could stabilize forces too wild to measure. She had created a legacy not with weapons or authority, but with care, patience, and the human ability to remain calm in the storm. The Emperor watched as Myra settled for the night, the dragons sleeping close to her. He knew that humanity's gift was rare, almost invisible, but stronger than any force in the universe. And he understood that Myra had given him, and his children, the greatest gift of all, the knowledge that power could exist without fear, and that calm could shape the galaxy as much as strength. The nursery remained peaceful, the dragons safe, and Myra's presence unwavering. The galaxy may have demanded many things, but the human nurse had already given what mattered most: trust, calm, and a quiet gift that would ripple through generations. Humanity had survived the stars, not with fire, not with weapons, but with the power of patience and care. The Emperor's hatchlings slept peacefully, the glow of their energy soft and steady. Myra rested among them, the anchor in the storm, the quiet guardian of creatures who could have destroyed worlds. And in that quiet, the galaxy learned its greatest lesson. Sometimes the most fragile beings hold the greatest power.